Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Combat Carnivore. And if it's your first time, welcome to the Combat Carnivore. Make sure to like and subscribe. And today with us is Kerry Man from Homestead How. What a pleasure! Um, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to introduce yourself, what you do, because I will simply not do it justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I've been carnivore now for I'm going towards 600 days or so, and it's changed my life forever. I've been doing YouTube videos for years about homesteading, and then I found this crazy carnivore diet, and it's changed my life forever in profound ways. I was 100 pounds heavier at my worst, but I also had depression and anxiety and arthritis and brain fog and all sorts of stomach issues and problems, and carnivore has fixed all of that for me. I've done more and more YouTube videos on it, and then I decided to do a documentary called Healing Humanity: The Power of a Proper Human Diet, where we're following real individuals over the course of a year that are just seeing miraculous health recoveries and transformations by eating a proper human diet. And it's become my new mission. My purpose in life is to get the word out. There's so many people in the world right now that are hopeless with depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes. Just these health issues are rampant. So I want people to know that this is an additional tool in their toolbox and an option for folks out there.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that we have people like you who are doing it. To me, once you experience this, it's so, I guess, like unveiling the man behind, the curtain, and that you're almost so mad. Like, I can't believe that this is occurring, and it overwhelms you with a sense of urgency and passion to get this message out to everybody. And like you're talking about with brain fog, I had a litany of symptoms, but brain fog, anxiety, panic disorder. I remember I used to beg and pray for an hour of mental clarity. Just like give me 1 hour where I can be normal. I used to beg and pray for that. And my mission, I know you're healing all of humanity, which is like and such an incredible feat to take on. But I've decided to take my mission to veterans. So I believe that veterans are not hearing this message. I think the current intervention methods um, with veterans and suicide are atrocious. And according to the numbers, 22 vets a day are committing suicide. 135 Americans a day are committing suicide. 1.6 million Americans are attempting suicide each year. And those numbers are just showing me it's egregious. It's showing me that their current intervention methods do not work and they haven't done anything to try and fix it. So I believe that with a proper human diet, and then for me, a couple different things like practical applications of like philosophy, but also something like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, like simulating combat in a safe environment. So I call it steak, strangles, and stoicism. So healing vets through steak, strangles, and stoicism. So my goal by having you on the podcast, having you on the show, is to ask you, someone who's got a lot more expertise in this, what would you say to veterans who are suffering from brain fog and PTSD, who feel like they're stuck, who feel like they're trapped, who feel like they're just broken from what happened to them in the past? What would you, Kerry Man, say to veterans who's currently healing humanity?
Well, yeah, great question. I would say there is hope. There definitely is hope. There's so many people that are hopeless in the world, veterans included. It's interesting, Chad, like veterans have become a huge part of my documentary. Wasn't ever really intended to go that way. Like all these things are coming out differently afterwards. But I interviewed a gentleman named Arn, and he's 80 years old, and he was a veteran. And he had horrible depression, suicidal depression. He actually wrote a book about it: depression, anxiety, PTSD. I've also done some work with carnivore soldier Larry, who has a similar mission. It breaks my heart what's going on with veterans. Number one, mental health, depression, anxiety wise. Number two, PTSD. Number three, like employment rates when people come back from serving our country. There's so many things. And I guess my overall message is there is definitely hope. And one of the things that I found learning from Arn and Carnivore Soldier Larry is that I think it's similar to me. Like we don't want to ask for help. And I think that's more so probably for soldiers. It's like, no, I can tough this out. I can be tough. I can do this. But this is something that you're not even asking for help for. I get this all the time, Chad, where people are like, I wish I could do that, but my doctor's not on board. And I'm like, you don't need your doctor for this. You don't need your doctor to change the way you're eating. You're choosing what you're putting in your mouth and what you're eating. Now, it'd be great if your doctor was on board and doing like a ketogenic approved sort of doctor. They're hard to find. But if you're a veteran or you're an individual, you're anybody, you can do this yourself and it'll change your life forever. The biggest advice I give to people is this: just do this for 30 days. Look at your life like this. This is the entirety of your life. And 30 days of the entirety of your life isn't even a sliver of paper. It'll go by it'll go by so quickly. And the majority of humanity is going to go their entire lives never feeling what it's like to really live. You have this brain fog, you have this fatigue, you have maybe a little bit of depression, a little bit of anxiety, but everybody on the standard American diet has that brain fog, and they don't realize the extent of that brain fog. And that brain fog is intoxicating. It's almost like you're walking around your entire life drunk, but it's your new normal because you do it every single day. So that's all you know. And you probably even realize, you're probably like, yeah, I got a little bit of brain fog, but I'm here to tell you it's way worse than you realize. You can't see the fog while you're in the fog. And when you get out of it, I hear this from every carnivore, and I've talked to hundreds of them now. Every single one of them, that's one thing they have in common. They get rid of that brain fog and they're like, oh my goodness, I feel like a proper human now. I feel strong and my cognitive ability's better and everything is improved. An absolute tragedy that the majority of humanity is going to go through their entire lives never feeling like Chad has felt or like I have felt. So if you're a veteran, that would be my biggest message: is there's hope. There's other veterans out there going through this. So follow what Chad's doing. Follow Carnivore Soldier Larry. My buddy Arn, I've done a couple of videos with him. And Arn was just here sitting next to me. So I did a video with him. He wrote a book. It's heartbreaking and encouraging at the same time. But he said, Kerry, for the first time, I'm not having any moments of depression, any dark moments. He said, like, for the first time in his life after doing Carnivore Diet. And he said to me, he's like, I want to ask you something. I really think that veterans and service men and women, we should have a section in the documentary about that. And after I was talking to him more, I'm like, we're going to do it. We're doing this main documentary, and then we're also doing a series. And so I'm dedicating an entire episode in the series to veterans, servicemen and women, and mental health, depression, anxiety, and showing examples like, this is a vet that had PTSD or depression. This is what they did, and here's the result. We're just putting the results out there. So I'm hoping to inspire more people like that. I guess one last thing I'll say real quick: I have nothing but love and respect for veterans. I wanted to join the service, and when I was in high school, and I wanted to join the Air Force. I actually went into like a recruiting office, and I was too fat at the time. It was like I was over, like there's actual like weight requirements and things like that. I'm like, I'd have to lose so much weight. Long story short, I never did, but my dad was in the Navy. My sister was in the Army. We run our small town movie theater. I'm actually, you can see the poster there. I'm in the basement of the movie theater. My wife and I purchased the movie theater like 2 years ago. And a couple months ago, we announced that veterans are free forever at Montello Theater. My wife and I personally, out of our own funds, we donated $500. And then the community like started going nuts. So now other people have donated. But long story short, veterans will never pay for a movie ticket here at our theater. So I do have nothing but respect and love for our veterans. And they need to be appreciated much more than they are. And I think the mental health, suicide rates, things like that is atrocious. Everyone needs to, a lot of people don't know the suicide rates of veterans, like you mentioned earlier. Everyone needs to know that, but I'm hoping to get the word out with this documentary going forward.
I would absolutely love to assist with that in any way I can. I was a veteran. I served in a couple different branches, and I was almost one of those statistics. I had a very unorthodox way. I almost died, and thank goodness my life was saved. But I started going down this really negative path, and it sucks because the current intervention methods are, first, like you said, no one's asking for help. But then when you do ask for help, when you finally like, okay, I'm asking for help, it's like, hey, you're loved. The world is better with you in it. Here's some drugs. And that's it. That's the only, and it's like, you already have some imbalance in your physiology. Let's go ahead and add some androgynous chemicals to that, see if it gets better. And obviously, it hasn't been working for the past 23 years. And the statistics I was telling you were from 2021. So the numbers are even worse. So 7,057 servicemen and women have died on the line of duty since 9/11, 2001. In 2021, so a 20-year anniversary of that, over 30,000 servicemen and women have committed suicide. So if you decide to join the United States military, you're 4 times more likely to die at your own hand than of a terrorist or an enemy of the United States. And so we are effectively better at killing ourselves and imploding than, other people are at killing us. I mean, I think that those numbers show how atrocious our system is. And on top of that, the drug companies are still making money just by continuing to put that into our soldiers who made that ultimate sacrifice. So, yeah, I was almost one of those statistics, and Carnivore saved and got me out. So, whatever I can do to help with that documentary, I would love to be a
Yeah.
part of it.
I appreciate it. I'll definitely follow up with you because, like I said, we're hoping to do a whole episode on it. I want to get as many stories as we can because you have 2 or 3 in there, and then people are like, "Oh, that's just an anecdote." What you said earlier, though, it is absolutely tragic what you just said there. That should be all over the news. We don't hear things like this. There's all sorts of, we talk about politics and just the same stuff over and over again in the news. It's tragic to me that that statistic you mentioned, everybody should know about that. That's absolutely insane. And you're right. Like this is the reason I'm so passionate about like depression, mental health. I've shown this before on my channel, but these are all my medications. At one time, I was on like 15 medications. Most of those were for depression, anxiety, mental health disorders, which is exactly what you just said. When someone, soldier, veteran, otherwise serviceman or woman goes in for help, that's what they'll say. Here, take these pills. Those pills did nothing for me. They did absolutely nothing for me. I was on them for years and years and years. Maybe I'm still here because of it, but it turned me into just an emotionless zombie. The reason they didn't work is so crystal clear to me right now. It wasn't treating the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem for so many people is nutrition and the food we're putting into our body. They're causing depression, they're causing anxiety. So putting a pill on, it's like a temporary band-aid. It's not going to fix the root cause of the problem.
It's definitely chronic. And what sucks, it's like cigarettes. It's you had to go through so many studies to show that chronic cigarette usage was bad, even though you didn't feel that way when you just smoked one. And like showing that with plants and I guess over processed foods is it's difficult to show. Like, hey, I feel good right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're not seeing, and then they gaslight you to tell you it's your genetics and it's your problem for eating too many calories.
Oh, God.
And when I say it's chronic, this is another interesting statistic from the 2021 study. Over 5,000, it was like 5,100. I can't remember exactly, but over 5,000. Okay, let me say this statistic. So 22 people a day. And so it turned out to be about 8,000 and some change of veterans die a year. And out of those 8,000, 5,000, over 5,000 were veterans who were 50 years or older. So it's like as time goes on, which is weird because when you look at World War I and World War II statistics, it's like their suicide rate and mental health like kind of peaked in, or I guess not their mental health, the lack of mental health, I should say, peaked right after the war, but then they got better over time, which is what you would expect to see as you're not overly stressed for extended periods of time. However, we're seeing the opposite trend. And I think, experiencing this myself, DFAC food and MREs and all these foods that are given to servicemen and women are overly processed, high in fiber to make you feel satiated. You know what I mean? And not a lot of fatty red meat, a lot of carbs. There's even candy in there, you know what I mean? And nightshades like Tabasco sauce. So you not only are you being overstressed for a chronic period of time or extended period of time, but then you're given food that doesn't support your digestion. And then when you get home, you're still put on an ultra processed diet, like the standard American diet, and then you're given drugs. So it's weird to see that this is definitely showing to me, at least, to be a chronic issue because it gets worse as time goes on. That's a weird statistic that I never really considered, that they're 50 years and older was 5,000. So basically 5 out of 8 of those suicides were from like older veterans.
Wow. Yeah. I'm right on board with you. The first thing I'd warn people too, oh, this just drives me insane. If you're diagnosed with a mental health disorder and they tell you, well, we don't know why, or it's just genetic, like you said, I think that's one of the worst things in the world. That's what they told me. And then I look at it like, well, there's just something wrong with me. I'm defective. My brain's defective. There's something wrong with me. I'm just always going to be this way. And then it gives you this crutch where you accept it and there's nothing you can do about it. Out of all of this, like we filmed 30 people for this documentary, but I've talked to well over 100 on my channel. And then through all the comments, thousands and thousands of people, almost every person I've talked to, they'll do carnivore or a proper human diet because of one reason. Maybe it's type 2 diabetes, maybe it's fertility issues, maybe it's just because they're overweight. But every single one of them says, my mental health improved drastically, or I didn't even realize I was depressed and now I feel better.
Mm.
It's like every single person is the same thing. So I always warn people, if you're told, oh, if you feel like you're genetic, you're defective in some way, or it's your genetics, don't listen to that. If a doctor ever tells you that, you should really be running for the hills. That's what drove me nuts too, is you'd go to a doctor and they'd say, we don't know why this is it, but here's some pills. Well, if you don't know the root cause, why are you telling me to take this pill if you don't know what the root cause of the issue is? Yeah, that just drives me insane. The fact that it's older veterans over 50 like that too is, you're totally right. It's chronic. Like, you get hooked on these addictive foods and they create inflammation, and it's chronic inflammation. And when you have chronic inflammation for long enough, you get depression, you get anxiety, you do it for years and years, you get dementia, you get Alzheimer's, you get cancer. It's like all of this stuff is so crystal clear. But people hear us talking about it, it sounds like we're talking crazy talk or something like that. But
You had
everyone in the world should be worried about inflammation and chronic inflammation, and they're
Mhm.
not. You probably get this too, Chad. I get it all the time. I'm just absolutely thriving on carnivore, and people still say, what about your cholesterol?
Yeah.
I'm like, what about your inflammation? Your body is totally inflamed right now, and you have poor metabolic health. You're 6 times more likely to suffer a heart attack or have heart disease if you have poor metabolic health. If your
Mhm.
body's inflamed, you have insulin resistance. 9 out of 10 people walking around right now have poor metabolic health, and they're completely clueless about it. And they're still talking about cholesterol, which is the most foolish thing in the world. So much stuff of this is just completely backwards.
You had a great quote when I first started listening to you. You feel like you found like a treasure chest, like a pot of gold in the middle of New York City, and everyone's just walking by it. And you're
Yeah.
like, guys, look, it's right here. It's so obvious.
It drives me nuts. This is what the human brain does. We get into these social norms, and it's just like, well, it's just the way things have always been. And
Mhm.
people start accepting things they shouldn't accept. If you look around in the world right now, and 7 out of 10 people are overweight, and children are pre-diabetic. This was unheard of 20 years ago. If you had a teenager pre-diabetic, the doctor would be like, send him to a specialist. This is crazy. I've never
Yeah.
seen this before. Now it's happening everywhere. Heart disease is the number 1 killer. Cancer rates amongst those in their 40s and 50s. Everyone's fat, everyone's sick, but if you just go and talk to like general public, then it's just the way it's always been. It's not that bad. It
Yeah.
drives me absolutely insane. And
And then
part
blame
of
it
the
on
reason
genetics.
for that is we get these routines that our brains like to go in because we're trying to conserve energy, because so much of humanity is so fatigued and they're in that brain fog and they're barely able to get through the day. I used to get home from work typing on a computer and I have to lay down on the couch, like seriously, from typing on a computer, because I was so exhausted. But that's the majority of humanity. When I look at what I did before versus what I could do now, I could do like 10 times what I did before and I'm still not tired at all. It's because you're putting the proper fuel in, and the majority of humanity is not putting the proper fuel in. But yeah, I look at this like it's like a gold chest. It's like, what is more valuable than our health? There's nothing. Like, you can't have your family, you can't have your loved ones, you can't have any of that if you don't have your health. You might be able to have it temporarily, but you're not experiencing life to the fullest potential when you're doing that. And yeah, it drives me nuts that it's like right here, just do this, but it's so hard for people to wrap their brain around. So we're hoping to do it more with the documentary. I'm never telling anyone like, hey, you need to do carnivore diet. It's changed my life forever, because nobody will listen to me. But I
Mhm.
believe we can inspire them and say, look what Bill Knott in Alaska just did. Look what I did. Look what this person did. And do what you want with their example. But I think it'll plant a seed and maybe inspire people. I think that's how ultimately people will change.
I agree. Um, you talked earlier about like a multitude of symptoms. They usually go for one symptom, but there's a multitude of symptoms, and a lot of people don't realize it's all connected. I know I didn't realize. I was going to this specialist for this, that specialist for this. I mean, I was in my 20s going to gastrologists all the time, having scopes getting put down in all holes in my body to try to find what was going on with me. I was having acute flu-like symptoms 3 to 4 times a week, where for like 8 hours of the day, it was like migraine, throwing up, like every symptom. It's just in pain. and I would just not be able to function. And that's not normal. And the doctor would be like, well, your vitals look okay.
Yeah.
Let's send you to a specialist. And so even though I was going through like horrible, horrible physical pain, the mental pain was a lot worse than that. And I think we know that with like Michaela Peterson, like even though she was going through horrible things, it was like the mentality that was crushing her. So, and I say this because a lot of veterans, especially all the ones who joined around the same time, same thing. Not only do they are they messed up mentally, but they all have digestive issues. It's all related, and they all act like it's like, oh, I'm just broken because my digestion's messed up because I was in the military, and I know if I have anxiety, my gut's going to be messed up. Like that's what they're left with.
Yeah. Well, you know something I learned. Any veteran, anyone out there, I recommend this book, Dr. George E. Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. It's
Hmm.
incredible. I've been learning so much more because that was the biggest thing that fixed for me was depression and anxiety. I'm like, what are the mechanisms behind it? One of the things I learned early on from Dr. Tony Hampton is that serotonin, right? I've heard about serotonin a lot throughout my life with the depression, anxiety, and medication. Serotonin is primarily created in the gut. It's made in the gut. And a lot of the foods we're eating disrupt the serotonin production that goes to your brain. I interviewed this woman, her name is Malia, and she's a carnivore and it saved her life, depression, anxiety, and she's a coach and she helps a lot of people. But the organization she works with focuses on gut health. And she was digging into this more with me. It was just incredibly interesting. But she's saying we have good gut bacteria and bad gut bacteria. And she said that they actually have this down to a science because when I was interviewing her, it was interesting. She said something that really stood out to me. She's like, right around 3 weeks, her anxiety and depression started to, they didn't go away, but they started to lift. And I was like, Malia, that is so crazy because that was me too, 3 weeks, Todd Bachnis. I
Hmm.
started naming all these people I've interviewed. They all say like right around 3 weeks or so, not that it all goes away, but people have this, whoa, something's going on differently here. That these stupid pills, I never felt anything like that with these pills for going on these for 10 years. You notice something. And she told me, Kerry, there's some science behind this. She said, it's your gut bacteria that feed the serotonin. And right around 3 weeks, there's different types of gut bacteria and they die off at different rates, but it starts killing off the bad gut bacteria. And then your serotonin starts to increase. The other thing is your hormones start to improve when you start eating fatty meat again. That
Hmm.
was the biggest thing that was missing for me. I get so many people that tell me, you would have just done the same thing if you quit sugar and carbs. I did that for almost a year before carnivore. I was doing clean, like almost vegetarian, plant-based salad for lunch, salad for dinner, no sugar. I was still depressed. I was still anxious. I still had IBS and all of these issues. But when I got the fatty meat, the cholesterol, which has been demonized for so long, I believe I was deficient in cholesterol and I believe I needed more. When I started eating fatty meat, my mood started improving. My testosterone went up. My sleep improved. Those are all things that are related to your hormones. But
And
the
cholesterol.
gut biome thing that she told me at 3 weeks, I was like, that blew my mind. And then she told me this, Chad. She was like, when you eat fat and protein, it actually feeds the good gut biome. And this is like, she's not just talking, this organization she's working with, they've done all these studies on it. They have science that backs this up. I'm doing another follow-up interview with her to get more into the science because I had so many questions. But the bad gut biome feeds on starch and carbs. She's like, if you eat a big bowl of rice or sugar or whatever, you just see an explosion of the bad gut biome. And when you eat fat and protein, it feeds the good stuff. So it was really interesting to me. There's a lot of things that go into play with this, but cholesterol, gut biome, those things. The hope is for veterans or anyone listening out there is you can start to see results relatively quickly. A lot of people say like within 3 weeks, they have a whoa moment or they notice this. I always tell people, I'm like, just do this for 30 days. You're a veteran, you're a soldier. You can certainly do this for 30 days. Like if you did that, you can do this for 30. I did this for 30 days and people are like, oh, Mr. Willpower. I'm like, I don't even have really any willpower. I was just desperate, but I'm like,
Yeah.
just eat meat and repeat for 30 days. And what'll happen is you'll get to day 30 and you're going to be like, I feel so incredible. I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep. That's what I did. I told myself I'll do it for 30 days. And on day 31, I'm going to add back in ketogenic, clean foods. But I'm like, I'm not missing anything. And I feel so incredible. If you're thinking about doing this and you think this is crazy, because I thought it was crazy, Chad probably thought it was crazy. I'm just going to eat meat. That's nuts. Look at it this way as an elimination diet. Just say, for 30 days, I'm going to eliminate sugars, seed oils, highly processed garbage humans were never intended to eat. ultimately you're kind of telling yourself that you're just going to eat meat. But if you rephrase it that way, it's a lot easier for us humans to wrap our brains around it. That made it, I think everyone, even vegan, vegetarian people could agree, get away from the standard American diet for 30 days and see what will happen. Um, yeah, you'll, by the time you hit day 30, you're never going to look back.
Yeah, so a few different things there. One, no, like 10 years ago, when this started to get really bad for me, I never realized like food and mental health had such a direct connection. But what sucks is when you start researching, especially 10 years ago, there was nowhere. There was nowhere to be found. And if you Google, and this is kind of like what my channel is about as videos start to get released, is I Google, so I like have a screen share and I Google what is a healthy diet. And so even when you're trying to take autonomy and responsibility over your own health, you're fed a load of BS. All the studies are from corrupt sugar companies or whatnot, or it's from evangelical, like Seventh Day Adventists who have like manipulated and monsterized like what nutrition industry is. And in addition to that, like gut biome is very interesting. I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I'm reading studies recently. One, I don't think people realize how influential gut bacteria is, but I think a lot of bad gut bacteria gets like a bad rap because a lot of people are saying that bacteria is symbiotic or in a symbiotic relationship with humans because it's actually helping take off some of the load onto our body. So it's like, hey, like we can't handle all the starch. We can't handle all these carbs. Like if you help us with this, at least it'll help balance it out. And so we actually end up allowing the bad bacteria to eat those things, like, or we allow the bacteria in, and it's like kind of like this relationship where it's like eat as much as you can depending on what's in there. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
what's weird is like the first time I fasted, right? So I'm starting to learn. It was so cool because I disagree a lot with Paul Saladino, but he was the first person I saw where he was like a psychologist and he's relating mental health to eating animal based. And I'm like, what is this? Right. But then I got into fasting. And in my first 3 day fast, before I had even gone completely carnivore, I felt that mental clarity. And what
Yeah.
was interesting, what came out the other end after the fast was terrifying. And so you talk about killing off the bad bacteria, that bacteria was no longer needed. You know what I mean? And as I
Yeah.
went carnivore, I think that's a lot of obviously what's happening with like the carnivore diarrhea. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's this bacteria is just start being starved out. So it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily bad or it had like um, negative intentions or whatever. It was just correlated, just kind of like falsely how, and what I'm wanting to get back into here, how cholesterol has been falsely attributed to heart disease, but it's like, well, when somebody dies from a heart attack, they have high cholesterol. It's like blaming the firemen for being at the fire. And well, every time I see where a fire happened, there's fire trucks there. So obviously, firefighters are the cause of fires, right? And so I think that there might be, I always say, I think I've just been reading about this recently, like you, but about the bad bacteria. And when you said, okay, my cholesterol, and you said you thought you may have had low cholesterol, my cholesterol when I was plant based, I was getting tested with labs because I was going to specialist after specialist. My cholesterol was low on every level when I was mentally at my worst, and my testosterone was like a 100 or 200.
Mm.
And that, like, so you're right. And eating, and they kept telling me to like lower my fat amount, my fat consumption, this, that, and the other thing, increase fiber. And when I actually went animal based, my cholesterol went way up, but my mental health went way up. My testosterone went way up. And I don't think people realize that cholesterol is the precursor to hormonal function. And for men, you have to convert cholesterol into testosterone. And for women, you have to convert cholesterol into testosterone into estrogen. Like estrogen comes from testosterone in women. And so by not consuming cholesterol, men become more feminine and women become more masculine.
Yeah.
It's such a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like when you start going down these rabbit holes, but it all makes sense. Like you look around in the world right now, fertility rates are dismal. Like so many people are having problems having babies now. But then it's like, well, it makes perfect sense. What are we doing? We're pushing more plant-based, standard American diet. And when I say plant-based too, some people think we're just talking about eating salad and going vegan. But again, when you go in the grocery store, there's 60,000 products in this grocery store. 99% of those are plant-based. If it's in a
Mhm.
box, a bag, whatever, if it's Doritos, if it's potato chips, if it's cereal, those are all derived from plants. On the gut bacteria thing, I'm learning so much more. Like I thought I'm doing so good on carnivore because I'm in strict ketosis and I'm burning fat for fuel, and those things are true, but it goes deeper than that when you get into the gut bacteria. I'm really looking forward to having Malia back on the channel because that's all they specialize on. But I think you're absolutely right too with the bad gut biome. It's trying to it's trying to handle the toll we're putting on our digestive systems. And that has been a big thing I realized after becoming carnivore. I'm like, no wonder I was so fatigued and tired before because I was constantly eating because breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which is just paid for by Kellogg's and we've all fallen for. I used to do that though. I'd get up in the morning, I'd be like, oh man, I'm late to work. Breakfast is so important. I better eat something. Oh, okay. And then I end up eating like a Pop Tart or some junk or even like an apple or something like that. But even if I would eat an apple, 2 hours later, I'm starving again. Well, why is that? Because an apple today is basically a big ball of sugar. And my body wants more and more of it. And then 2 hours later, eating again. 2 hours later, eating again. I remember going to the grocery store, filling that cart up, and it's just full of junk waste, and we're putting all of that waste into our bodies. And like you said, the bacteria's got to fight it, but your body's also got to digest it, which requires an incredible amount of energy to do that. And then what? Does it get a break after that? Well, on carnivore, it does because I oftentimes eat once or twice a day, and then it's just resting the other 23 hours of the day. Not on the standard American diet because 2 hours later, I'm hungry again. Start the digestive system going again, get that gut bacteria going again, getting back to work at it. So it's constantly just working on things. I think you're right too. Like people that get diarrhea, the keto flu symptoms the first couple of weeks, it's just your body probably purging out all of those
It
toxins.
is.
And I noticed the same thing fasting too. I think it's all tied together. You're fasting and you're starving the bad gut bacteria. You're allowing your body to reset. You're allowing your digestive system to relax. All of these things go back to one simple thing that I've realized, and that's just returning to what's natural for humans. Like throughout humanity, we probably would have fasted for 3 days many, many, many times. We would have hunted, we would have caught a big animal, we would have feasted. It might have been 3 days, might have been a week, might have been 2 weeks before we caught another big animal. So our bodies, like ancestrally speaking, this is what we would have done normally. What's really abnormal is putting food into our body every 2 hours. That has never happened, ancestrally speaking, throughout time. And look what's happening because of it. It's like birth rates,
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, obesity, type 2 diabetes are all just going through the roof.
You know, something that you said that I absolutely love, and I've been repeating this over and over as like a mantra almost. Science will continue to catch up with our ancestors. It like you're gonna, and what is frustrating is like as I'm listening to these courses, like nutrition courses and whatnot, they keep saying, well, the data says this and the data says that. And I'm like, God, of course the data says whatever, like who's promoting it, right? And
Yeah.
so if you have like a corrupt system that's providing the data and you're going to continue to wait till you get the data that's going to show you right. If we use just pure logic, let's get all the science out of it, right? And let's get all the logos out of it and the ethos out of it, or sorry, rather, let's get all the ethos out of it and just go complete logos. If we were to go through that, we would see what environment forged our DNA, our biology, our evolution. And if you mimic that, you're going to be most in alignment with how the human body is designed to cycle and designed to move and designed to replenish itself, so on and so forth. And so it developed, and for millions of years, it developed these certain kinks and tweaks and whatnot uh, in order to survive. And so then it found the most optimal way to survive, and that's the system we became. You know what I mean? So the closer we get with our ancestors is like grounding and being in the sun and not looking at blue light, obviously. You know what I mean? The more artificial and the more science and understanding we get, oh, we actually know this now. So let's go ahead and change the entire way we've existed for the past few million years. Following our ancient wisdom is probably one of the best things that we could do. And then, in a weird thing, thank goodness for science to show us what our ancient wisdom was like. So that way, like we can reconnect with it, because we have more of a connection now with the way our ancient ancestors lived compared to a couple thousand years ago. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyway, catching up with our ancestors is, I think, like if when in doubt, did our ancestors eat this way? No. Did our ancestors act that way, or what I mean, respond that way or put themselves in these certain situations? No. They just didn't. And so I believe that the body is way more superhuman than we realize. Like when we look at a lion and we're like, wow, that is badass. That lion can do this and do that, and it's like fearless and just stays out in the environment. We are them.
Yeah.
Humans were the alpha predators. They were in the environment. They were
Yeah.
getting the kills, and like they were surviving all these diseases. We are superhuman. We are the alpha predator. We view ourselves as like this incapable, unable to like do badass shit all the time. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
who we are designed. We're designed to handle traumas. That's why I say to vets, humans are designed to handle atrocities. They are designed to handle difficulties. It's not meant to break you. There's something wrong in the system of you personally. And I don't mean that as personally, you know what I mean? But as an individual, there's something wrong in the system that's causing these stresses to bring you down.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you on the studies and science that you mentioned earlier. That's been one of the biggest epiphanies I've had afterwards. I used to see that on the news or whatever. Oh, new study came out. Eggs are great for you. And then like a week later, new study came out. Eggs are bad for you. And I'm like, what is going on with this? My biggest realization on carnivore and advice for other people is if you ever hear of any nutrition food study ever, just completely ignore it. I believe almost every one of them, almost all of them are garbage. They cost so much money to produce, and therefore they're only being produced if there's a bias or a benefit at the end, like Kellogg's selling you more sugar or a drug company selling you a drug at the end. There, I used to think, oh, this is science. It's there for my benefit. And now I realize, no, it's just like everything else in the world. It's 100% profit driven. There's a bias, there's a motivation. And if you really think about it, how could a nutritional study even be accurate? You would need to take two almost identical humans, put them under the exact same scenario, make sure they're eating the exact same thing, almost from birth on, to make it like relevant, statistically significant, whatever you want to call it. It's almost impossible to do that. There's always some confounding variable or something in there that's going to throw it off. So much of the science we hear now, like the ones I've heard over the years on meat, still, like I said, people here, I'm doing carnivore, you're going to have a heart attack. Where are you getting this info? And it's always from some stupid observational study that says they went and they asked people, what did you eat? The people said, I ate meat more times than average over the last week. Okay, then meat causes heart disease. And they completely give a pass to most people eating meat are eating a burger from McDonald's. The bun gets a pass, the ketchup, the mustard, the pound of French fries, the gallon of soda that they're drinking with it, the ice cream afterwards. None of that had anything to do with it. Just this little tiny puck of a piece of meat did it. And that is like, that's how I encapsulate and think about all studies. That's our gold standard science of studies when we hear on the news over and over again. That's the kind of logic they're using. It's absolutely insanity.
Are
So
you
many things are just so backwards. Uh, that was studies. What else were you talking about? Oh, I had a really good point. Now I forgot it.
Oh, sorry. Well, always catch up with our ancestors.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah, yeah. That's been the biggest takeaway I've had from this documentary and researching this more is just returning to what is natural for humans. Um, it's just common sense too when you think about it. If you look at how far humanity's escaped from what is natural, mainly through our food, but also like you mentioned, looking at screens, sitting under fluorescent lights, not exercising, we're just getting sicker and sicker. It's like literally correlates perfectly as we get further and further away from what is natural. So that's my biggest advice for people is again, you're not just eating meat and getting healthier, but you're returning to what is natural. Oh, and that was what I wanted to say. You mentioned earlier how badass humans are. That is so true. These people I have, like, I went into this saying, I'm just going to do a documentary about the carnivore diet and what happens. And then what I've really found out is it is absolutely incredible how the human body will heal when we just get the hell out of the way and stop putting these poisons and toxins in and we just put the proper fuel in. It's like mind blowing. We have one woman we filmed for the documentary, Mimi. She's diagnosed with Parkinson's. She had a full blown stroke. She could barely walk a couple feet, and she's now training to hike a 500-mile hike, St. Francis of Assisi Trail. She's lifting weights every single day. She's running, I think, like 2 to 4 miles every single day now. She could barely walk 10 feet before. It's like, when you start thinking about it, it makes sense. The human body's amazing. We have cells. The cells will regenerate. It's like the stuff that can heal when you get out of the way is absolutely, it's blowing my mind. And interestingly, like, I've already filmed 30 people for this documentary, but over the last 3 weeks, just more and more people coming out of the woodwork with just these incredible stories. We're like, how can that even be possible? But for our documentary, we're looking at all everyone's medical records. So this isn't just like, oh, we're taking their word for it. No, this woman had Parkinson's and a stroke. I looked at her medical records, and now here she is now. It's amazing how the body will heal if you just let it do what it naturally should do and get out of the way.
You know what is very interesting is I'm applying for VA benefits right now. And so I'm doing this right now where I'm looking through all my medical history. I'm like, oh my God, like, like as it's just coinciding really well. So I just got interested. So I ran new labs today, actually. So I can't wait to get those results. Another thing is I was just at the beef roundup in Wyoming with Chafee and Bella and Dr. Kiltz, all the people, Raymond, all the big wigs. Angela, it was my first time meeting Angela, and she was really like the Angela. I can't remember what her last name was, but just a lot of incredible people, and not just them talking about their stories, but random people getting up. And these people just over and over, like I was crippled on the floor. Other people, the doctor gave me 3 years to live. You know what I mean? And like all these different scenarios. And it was like gut wrenching and emotional to hear story after story of people healing themselves. But it's almost more as horrifying that we were all suffering unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, I could not believe that no politician was talking about it. It wasn't up, but now I wanted to ask you about RFK, Robert
Yeah. Well, I've
Kennedy.
never, since doing carnivore, I'm like, I don't pay attention to news, politics, social media. I'm like 100% trying to better myself. But RFK came on my radar. I did see a couple clips online. And then I heard I heard the speech I guess he gave with Trump, and I think it's awesome. Like I don't know that much. I'm always weary about talking about stuff because people get so fired up, but
Right.
I'm always for whatever the truth is. And it sounds like he totally understands how toxic our food system is and how
Yeah.
sick we are and what it's doing to children, which is the other reason I'm so passionate about this. What's happening to children with um, autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, getting pre-diabetic, things like that. So uh, I love it. The thing that he mentioned too that really stood out to me was he mentioned Casey Means and Callie Means, and just
Yeah.
before he mentioned them, I'm not an affiliate. I'm not promoting their book, but I heard about their book, so I bought it. And they too, like you read this book, they're not carnivore. I wish their approach was a little bit different in terms of what to eat, but they're in agreement with RFK and myself that our food system is completely messed up, completely toxic, completely normalized, and people are getting so sick from it. So
Yeah.
I
If
love the fact that something's like someone's talking about it. I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk a lot more about it going forward.
You should definitely, I would take the half an hour to go watch his speech because it was a huge portion of his speech talking about Casey and Callie Means. And
Yeah.
he was listing out like statistics about like one in what was it, like 35 kids had autism. And then in California, it's like 1 in 22. And he's listing these statistics out and he's like, why are we letting this happen? And the as big of a deal as it needs to be, he was bringing it to the stage. And Donald Trump has brought him on to deal with that directly. He goes, I got into this race because of that. I got into this race to save these kids. And Donald Trump is now going to employ me on his cabinet, on his administration, rather, in order to deal with this. And then he says, I promise in 2 to 4 years, this is going to be eliminated.
Mm.
He's like, when Trump gets elected. So we might see some drastic changes. And even if it's just getting ultra processed foods out of our diet, and changing what the standard American diet is, even if it's not carnivore, just the fact, even vegans are going to agree, carnivores are going to agree, like we need to get this horseshit out of our kids' bodies. And what's weird is, uh, when I was telling my parents about this, and my sister and everybody, my sister and my mom wanted to hold an intervention for me because they thought I had gone off the deep end, and they thought I was like going to hurt my kids by having them go on an
Wow.
animal-based diet. And like, I was like, what? You know what I mean? Are you kidding me? And it's so weird that the food system has poisoned us so much that the idea of getting off all ultra processed foods and eating just pure whole foods that's animal based can get your closest family members like thinking that you having a problem. So it's backwards. The people who are addicted, the addicts, the ones who are addicted to drugs, are now holding interventions for the ones who have gotten off and they're
Yeah.
happy. Like it's
Everything's backwards, right?
it's
It's
backwards.
crazy. It's
So
crazy.
hopefully like RFK and like my mom and my sister seeing the RFK speech got them more interested. And that was
Yeah.
so it's cool to that a ton of people sent this to me. A ton of people who weren't carnivore were sending this message to me because they know this is what I talk about nonstop now. And so I think it's really important that we have somebody as powerful as RFK Jr. Getting that message out to I guess, start getting the curtain pulled to show the man behind the curtain to be like, you guys, this is not a hoax. This is a
Right.
legitimate person at a legitimate level telling you you are being poisoned. And then
Yeah.
the insurance company is a load of BS. And then you're put on drugs. And all these institutions are for profit. All of them are for profit. They're backed by the government. They're incentivized and subsidized by the government, and they're being paid for by you. So they're just getting money from every direction while you get sicker and sicker. And to have Robert Kennedy Jr., get up on stage and say, yes, all of a sudden I feel like validated, like
Yeah.
vindicated.
There's hope, right? It's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm so excited for it because prior to that, I never would have imagined there'd be a politician or someone in government like looking out for us that way or even talking about those things. In my mind, it's like we got to do this grassroots, which we're doing with the documentary. And then I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years from now, we can start getting this up to a higher level like that. So I'm totally excited for it. In fact, prior to that announcement with him on Trump, this was like maybe a month ago. This was like a huge long shot. I'm just a little YouTuber, but I was trying to reach out to RFK's team. I was like, I would love to talk to him.
right.
It's like him and Joe Rogan and a couple of these guys is like winning the lottery to be able to talk to one of them or
Yeah.
share their words. But
I feel like I
that's
won the
exciting.
lottery talking to you right now. The fact that you
Oh, I
answered me.
appreciate it. Yeah.
But you know what's even more interesting, and maybe you can speak more on this. What I think one of the most passionate parts that I got involved in during the speech is he started saying, "Do you know why the Democrats don't talk about this and why they're going to shut this down?" He goes, "The people who I'm talking about are their donors."
Hmm.
So he even called out the Democratic Party, which, by the way, like I am very apolitical in terms, like you said, I don't like to talk about politics, but it was just very interesting to see a politician get up there to talk about food and then call out who is funding, which donors
Right.
belong where. And it was, I think it, like you said, I think it might put our movement, when I say our movement, like eating healthy, it might put it on the map to
Yeah.
realize like it's not so much a conspiracy, like this is happening.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm excited for it. I really am. I was thinking about doing it. I think I will now. You've encouraged me. I want to do a whole video, kind of like a reaction video or something to that whole speech
you
because
should.
um, it's incredible that that's happening. It's you mentioned donors and stuff like that. It's like this. The root cause of all of this is really so simple. It's just greed. It's just money. It's the food companies. It's the drug companies. It's the hospitals. It's all. Every single incentive is only to make more money. We're just going to keep getting sicker and sicker. One of the crazy things. I don't know if you've heard of her, but I just did a video with her this morning. Actually, Lear Keith. It's not live yet. She wrote this, The Vegetarian Myth. She was on Dr. Barry's channel. She's carnivore. She was vegan for 20 years. But her big message, which I knew a little bit, but again, as the more I go down this rabbit hole, I learn more and more, is she believes that if we don't do something soon, drastic, it's going to be the end of our civilization, agriculture in particular,
Yeah,
because our soil is just depleted now. And you try to grow a fruit or vegetable in there, you get a carrot, and oh, it looks like a healthy carrot, but it has like 1/7 the nutrients it would have had 50 years ago because there's nothing in the soil. The soil is like dust, and we just keep blasting the soil with more chemicals and glyphosate and fertilizers, and it's everything that we're producing now is so artificial and so not natural, the opposite of natural, just being grown with chemicals. But she was getting into that, and she's like, this is like really simple. If anyone knows history, you go throughout history, civilization after civilization ended, and a lot of it was from agriculture. We invested
monocropping.
so much into agriculture and trying to feed people so much so quickly, but now it's catching up with us because the food is becoming less nutritionally dense and less valuable, and we're just using more and more chemicals, and people are getting sicker and sicker, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's worried me so much, that same thing you're talking about, that I've been thinking about getting some land and doing regenerative farming. But what's fun, one, I feel like you have a library right next to you. Like, it's so crazy how many books you're pulling up over
Yeah,
here.
I got a little stack.
And then, like you said, people don't realize how much human influence changes the environment. And it goes back and forth because, like Dr. Anthony Chaffee was talking about how the Sahara Desert is been argued successfully that that was man-made from monocropping because it used to be extremely green area. And then the Amazon, in addition, was man-made. Like
Mm,
it's a man-made jungle. That's crazy. Like the fact that they like made certain hybrid foods to survive in certain environments, and then when a lot of the humans who were keeping track of it like died off, they overgrew that area, the Amazon. And um so yeah, us getting involved with the ecosystem artificially has drastic impact. Drastic. I mean, we saw it even in the United States right after World War I with the Dust Bowls, right? Leading up
right.
to the Depression. And a lot of people do not realize monocropping, um, and what not only what it does to the soil and the ecosystem. Someone just keeps putting this video over and over in circulation. I'm seeing you. I'm sure you've seen it, but said uh, carnivore is the most vegan diet you can do because it kills the least amount of animals.
Yeah. I've been
Right?
saying that from the beginning. My daughter was vegan for 5 years, and I was calling her the compassionate carnivore. And I asked Leah Keith about that. I was like, well, what is the best, most compassionate diet? And she said, without a doubt, it's carnivore. It's like I eat, especially if you're doing it properly, but I eat one cow. I try to get most of my meat from my neighbors. So it's regenerative raised cow. The cows are grazing in the field naturally. It's the most natural thing in the world. One cow, I get hundreds of meals. It could last me a year. And then she's like, if you're plant-based, you're vegan, thousands and thousands and thousands of animal died just from the tractor going through the field and plowing, all the pesticides put on top of it. 70 million birds die a year from pesticide poisoning.
What?
And those are, yeah, have you heard that one before?
No, I heard the billions of bees
Yeah.
from
So
almonds and avocados, but
anyone listening to this right now, please don't take my word for it. Just Google how many birds die per year from pesticide poisoning. And this is from the
no.
EPA. It's 60 or 70 million birds per year from pesticide poisoning. And by the way, that is a horrible, painful, slow poisoning death for these birds. And that is on fruits and produce and vegetables. Now, some
Wow.
people will argue, oh, no, that's just on the grain food that then goes to feed the cows. And I'm saying, well, I'm not advocating for that. I'm eating cows that eat grass that grows naturally in the field. And that's just the birds. And then you have to account for all of the other downstream effects. That's also bunnies and fox and squirrels and deer. And then the scavenger animals that eat those 70 million birds that then get poisoned and end up dying because of it. It's like
Whoa.
there is untold carnage from eating a plant-based diet. It gets me because my daughter did it because she loved animals. She's compassionate and her heart's in the right place. And that's why I like vegans from that aspect, because their heart's in the right place. But the facts matter. And the fact of the matter is you're actually killing way more animals than you would if you're carnivore. I've even said to people, Chad, I'm like, if you want to just stick to doing plants only and you want to be more compassionate, then just do like I do. I only eat one food. I'm doing line diet right now. So I'm like, I
Yeah.
just eat beef. So you just eat lettuce only. Give up the tomatoes and the cucumbers and all those other things, because those are all having pesticides poured on those as well, and untold animals are dying. So at least you could limit your death footprint a little bit. People don't like hearing that, but it's like, oh, that's too restrictive, just eating lettuce. I'm like, or you could just eat a proper human diet like I'm doing, and that'll kill the least amount of animals. But her big point was, it doesn't matter what you do on this earth. There's a little fish, there's a big fish, there's a food chain. If you want to be alive on this earth, something else is going to die. It doesn't matter what you label yourself, if you're vegan or plant-based or carnivore or whatever. You're either going to die or something else is going to die if you have to survive. And people need to understand that. And most people don't. It's great that you have feelings and you're compassionate for animals, but the facts matter. You're actually killing many, many multitudes more animals by eating that way than we are on a carnivore diet.
Speaking of which like my friend tagged me in this picture not too long ago, which it was his ribeye. He said, "Eat filtered plants," right? It was kind of a funny little thing, but I wanted to ask you, going on the lion diet, which was coined by Mikhaila Peterson, right? Um, I'm on the lion diet, I would say as well. I've been that way for the last couple months. I would say maybe 3 months actually. Was there a significant change? Because I noticed there was a significant change getting off of eggs and fish and chicken and just going straight red meat. So I already felt great carnivore, but man, I feel incredible. And I'm an athlete. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'm very competitive. And I had my first competition about a month after doing that. And I felt like a beast. Like I've always hated competing, and that's why I've always done it. But man, I cannot express the way I felt. The impact it had on me post and prior to competing, but in the competition itself. So I want to ask you, what ups and downs have you noticed by going strictly lion diet? And in addition to that, can you extend on, for example, even though I eat mostly steak, I eat like bone marrow, every once in a while, some offal, however they say it. And so it's like kind of like bone marrow, brains, maybe sometimes some liver, but like beef suet, so on and so, because they think when we say that we're only eating like ground beef and steak. But do you kind of extend? So I tell people I eat cow salt water basically because I
Yeah.
try to eat a large part of the cow. What would you say?
Yeah, for me, well, it's funny on the jujitsu thing. That's so cool. They're going to need like a separate carnivore division for the carnivores at some point. That's pretty awesome. I feel so much better on lion versus carnivore, but it's exactly like you said, Chad. I feel absolutely incredible on carnivore. So I don't want to mislead people, but I almost feel like superhuman on lion. I just feel better. And I don't know what it was for me because when I was doing just strict carnivore, I would do beef, butter, bacon, eggs. I'd have like bacon and eggs every day. So I don't know, was it the eggs? Was it the bacon? Some people have issues. Some people have issues with eggs. I could have just done like one at a time, but I did lion earlier and I learned about carnivore through Dante Ferrigno and the Peterson family as well. But Dante was doing lion diet too. So I wanted to try it a long time ago. I feel like superhuman. I just feel completely better. Sometimes when I'd eat bacon and eggs, I'd get a little bit of inflammation coming back. I feel more energetic. And yeah, the best way I can describe it is I feel like superhuman. I feel like a superhero or something. I just endless energy. I just feel great. No aches and pains. The sleep is better. Yeah, and for me, it's basically cow only. Pretty much just meat, but I'm open to eating other things like bone marrow and things like that. But my go-to, like on a daily basis, it's usually a couple burger patties, maybe some ground beef, and if I'm lucky, like a good steak or roast or ribeye. That sounds like boring to a lot of people.
It's not.
I get it, but it's not. Yeah, it's not. Like every time I eat, I feel great. There's a thing that switches for us carnivore lion diet people where you no longer are eating food for entertainment or pleasure. And don't get me wrong, I still really enjoy eating a big fatty ribeye, but it's almost more of an appreciation versus before it was more of an addiction. It was like, I gotta have this. I'm like jonesing for this, like more sugar, more food. This is more of an appreciation, but I joke about it every time I'm biting into a steak or something. I'm like, I don't know how anybody could ever get sick of eating this way or bored by
Right.
eating it. I just it hasn't happened for me yet.
Well, it's like a cow is like, I don't think people realize it, but a cow is like a buffet. Like between the
Yeah,
bone marrow, the organs, the different cuts, the fat, like eating the beef suet, each one of those has like a unique taste and texture. And so as you like go through it, it's like, oh, there's a new flavor here and a new like. So if which I haven't, but like, oh man, I think I'm gonna eat like porterhouses this week. You know what I mean? It's a completely new. It's like you're
yeah.
doing something
It's like
new.
a different type of food altogether. It's
Yeah,
all beef, but I could close my eyes now too and tell you like, was this a New York strip or a
right.
ribeye or a tenderloin or this? And they're like completely different food groups. So people are like, oh, you're only eating beef. But in my mind, I'm like, no, that's like 25 different things with the bone marrow and the different cuts and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Even the different ways of preparing it. Like I can cook a porterhouse on a grill with charcoal, or I could smoke it, or I can do a sous vide, and all that's like three different food groups right there. Like they taste completely different
Right.
when you prepare them
And
differently.
yeah, I mean, think about that exactly what you're talking about, like smoking a roast or a brisket compared to like cooking ground beef in like a pan. Like that's complete, like you can mix it up so many different ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, just real quick, speaking of that, I gotta show you this. I don't know if it'll come through really good, but as we're speaking, this is what I got going on right now on the
oh
grill.
yeah.
This is a 20-pound brisket. It's been smoking overnight, and oh my goodness, nothing. There's no seasoning on it or anything, but it's gonna be ready in a couple hours. It was a big boy, but I had my window open a little bit and that smoke smell was just kind of wafting in. It was incredible. But that too is like a whole other food group. I don't have brisket very often. It's like a whole other thing.
Let me ask you, so any rituals, and this is just for me personally, away from the channel, but do you have any rituals like or ways of cooking to make it perfect every time? Because I notice I get really good based off sight, but sometimes like cuts are a little bit thicker. Sometimes like certain grills and stoves cook a little bit hotter, certain pans.
Yeah.
Um, I just got a way too expensive of a thermometer with like little 8 probes in there, or oh, it's one probe, but it's 8 sensors, and it connects to my phone like Bluetooth, and it tells me exactly what's happening in the steak and stuff. And so now, I mean, for me, it's like if I only eat one thing, I want it to cook perfect every time, regardless of where I'm at. You know what I mean? Do you
Right.
have any suggestions or rituals or stuff that you do in your cooking process that would help somebody who is like new into the fact that they are becoming their own personal chef and they're cooking meat nonstop all the time?
Right. Yeah. And it's more meat can be expensive. So you don't want to ruin a
Dude,
good cut of steak.
when I would ruin a steak, I would be
Right.
like so depressed. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah.
My advice would be, well, you kind of mentioned it. I always suggest to people cook to temperature, not time. If you
Hmm.
start Googling how to cook a good T-bone, it might say, well, if it's an inch and a half, do 8 minutes and then flip. But like you just said, every grill is a different temperature. There's hot spots, there's things like that. So the Bluetooth thermometer was really a lifesaver for me
Yeah.
early on. And it just like you mentioned, mine hooks up to my phone. I could even set a little alert, like when it gets to medium rare, ding me on the phone, pull it off, let it rest kind of thing. That's kind of been a big one. The other thing is different ways of preparing. I love the low and slow, hot
Hmm.
and fast method. So there's a couple ways, there's many ways you can do that. I do it on my smoker. I'll cook low and slow at like 225 degrees, and I'll get the steak up to maybe like 110 on the Bluetooth thermometer, and then I'll sear it hot and fast. And
Hmm.
that comes out incredible because if you get a thick steak, or not even thick, but it'll be the same consistency throughout. A lot of times when people cook steak, you just throw it on like a propane grill. That's the easiest. The outside of it's going to be well done, the middle is going to be medium, and then the very middle might be a little medium rare. But when you do low and slow, hot and fast, you get the same consistency. And you could do that with the sous vide machine, which aren't that expensive. You could do it by just putting a steak in your oven on the lowest temperature, get it up to temperature, and then pull it out and put it on a cast iron skillet hot and fast. You can go on a grill hot and fast, but that has been my big go-to: low and slow, hot and fast, and cooking to temperature, not time. And once you do it a whole bunch, like I have done it so much, I don't even honestly use the Bluetooth thermometer anymore. I know there's like you can feel the steak too, and
Right.
you can. There's a thing online I saw a long time ago, like this is medium rare, this is medium, this is well done kind of thing. But I usually get kind of the same cuts and the same thickness. I know my grill, so I can kind of tell. But those Bluetooth thermometers are getting a lot cheaper, and those could be a game changer, especially if you hook it up to your phone and you set the alerts up. Then you kind of can't go wrong. Oh, the last thing I'll say is there's some pretty inexpensive now uh, air fryers, which I thought cooking a steak in an air fryer was insane. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that. It's going to ruin a steak. But I've since come around, especially in wintertime in Wisconsin. I prefer to cook on the grill. But if there's 3 feet of snow outside, I'll throw it in the air fryer sometimes. And some of those, we recently got this one. It was like $100 air fryer. It had a temperature probe built into it. You put
Hmm.
that in the steak, and you just go on your phone. You're like medium rare, and it regulates the whole temperature, even the rest time afterwards, and then it just dings you, and it's like a perfect steak every single time.
Right.
Takes the guesswork out of it. So if you're really scared to do it, or you're a rookie in the kitchen, there's a lot of gadgets out there that'll help you.
Let me ask you this. One, what is the right temperature in your opinion, right? And then two, how do you feel about all the problems that have come out from air fryers in terms of heavy metals from the coil getting on the steak? And then three, while I was at this convention, I met this lovely Chinese couple, which I was speaking Chinese with them, and so they were really happy to speak Chinese with me. Um, and they were there because they're advertising their air fryer, which solves those problems.
Taste, is it the Tasty?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I met them in Austin. That couple was awesome. Actually, I sat down and had dinner with them, and one of them was thinking about doing carnivore. The Tasty folks. Yeah. Okay. So your first question, the perfect temperature, it's actually changing for me. I used to like medium, and then I went to medium rare. Now sometimes I'm more rare. And I've heard like Dr. Kiltz talk about you kill a lot of the nutrients when you overcook it. I've
Yeah.
always thought it was insane for anyone to cook a steak well done. but to each his own, like whatever they like. So I'm more medium rare nowadays. Uh, the second question you had was, wait, what was the second question? Oh, the air fryer baskets.
Yeah,
Or
like
maybe
the coils and
yeah.
heavy
Yeah,
metals getting
I'm
put.
with you. So it's like, man, we can't have anything nice in the world anymore, right? So I started doing the air fryer, and I started learning about that. The forever chemicals that off gas in some of those air fryers is insane. You got to be really careful. It's so funny you mentioned the Tasty couple. I did a video with them a long time ago, and then I told them, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to use the air fryer anymore because I'm worried about the forever chemicals and stuff off gassing. So now they're coming out with a ceramic insert
Yeah.
for their air fryer. So I still got to do more research. Like I'm skeptical about some of these things and recommending them to people, but it's definitely a concern. Outside of the air fryers, I've been really careful to avoid all of those things. Like I prefer to cook on cast iron.
Hmm.
I've got a really good ceramic pan too that I've researched that doesn't have any of the PFO8s. I think they are the forever chemicals. For anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, that's a whole other world of insanity. Talk about escape from natural, but there's a really good movie that came out a couple of years ago with Mark Ruffalo called Dark Waters that talks about that a little bit deeper. I'd highly recommend that one. But yeah, I try to avoid those things. The air fryer I have at home now was more expensive. I think I paid like $300 for this thing, but it's completely stainless steel with like ceramic on the inside. There's no forever chemicals in it, so it's tricky. Like the microplastics is another huge one that I'm starting to
Hmm.
learn more and more about, and yeah, it's getting trickier to kind of avoid these things. It isn't. It isn't. If you're educated, it doesn't have to be so tricky. But I'm learning more about these. I'm hoping to incorporate more of this into the documentary too, because initially it was just nutrition, and then it's like, whoa, wait a minute. There's a lot of other stuff going around in the world that we need to be aware of. That basically it all falls under the same umbrella I mentioned before: an escape from what's natural, having a
Hmm.
chemical that goes in your body forever, pretty unnatural. Having these microplastics accumulate in our body. You know, they're finding these things in our blood vessels and arteries now. I saw that recently.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
Someone that had
terrifying.
heart disease, they looked in their arteries and they had microplastics, and now they're worried those are going to cause blood clots in people. I'm sure they're still going to blame the meat for it when they pull it out. It's a big chunk of plastic in there, but it's just, yeah, it's crazy some of this stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it's gotten me to the point where I'm about because I own a jujitsu academy and I'm this close to like selling everything, and going out and homesteading, or rather like starting my own cattle ranch, or what, I mean, some regenerative farming, whatever it might be, or just getting on a damn sailboat and just like with my family
Right.
and going. But there's so much that I can influence, and I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. And you have your healing humanity, and I have it's. I just pulled it out of the washer. I wanted to wear it, but I didn't have time. But make veterans great again. This
Oh,
is
I love it.
what I'm trying to do, and it's not trying to be a political statement, even though everything's a political statement. It's not choosing sides. You know what I mean? What I mean, I'm tempted to go the RFK side right now, but
Right. Me
um,
too.
it's just, the idea of turning heads, and I think it'll get a lot of people talking, but says healing vets through stake strangles and stoicism.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and
Hey,
some yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'd love to invite you on my channel because there's so much more. I want to talk about stoicism with you and a couple other things. Open invite if you want to come on, especially since you're trying to spread the word about veterans. I'm all for that. Would love to have you on
Please.
sometime.
I mean, you're into stoicism?
I'm learning more about it, but yeah, I'm driving my wife nuts with some of it. Like she was telling me the other day, she's like, my mom just makes me so mad. And I remembered something I heard from Stoicis. I'm like, yeah, actually, she can't make you mad. You're choosing to allow that to get you mad. And
Yeah.
it's so true, though. There's so
Women
much good stuff there.
women hate men who are stoics because they never justify the emotions. In between stimulus and response, there's space, right? And in that space, there's the room to choose, right? And so it makes us ultimately responsible for our impact in this world and the way we decide to interact with it, rather than just being victims of outside circumstances. And what's weird is so many cognitive behavioral therapy, all the way to multitudes of other, like, I guess, like, what's the word I'm talking about? Well, practical life philosophies in addition, but therapies, there we go. Like, therapies are based off stoicism. It's just like stoicism rewrapped, repackaged, and given back out to the public, but it's like all based on these stoic principles. And of course, they're not completely original in themselves a lot of the time. They just take it to a more of an extreme. But Yeah, my goal is mind, body, and soul. I think we need to have all three of those in an equilibrium and have like three solid pillars built up, holding that up to. And for example, I feel like if you're spiritually broken, but yet you're some sort of like athlete and I don't know. Like, yeah, just say you're an athlete, right? You're going to be held back no matter what because you're spiritually broken. Like, all
Right.
three need to be in accordance. Just like a spaceship won't take off if just one thing goes wrong. Everything needs to be working. And I don't think people realize how important that is until, like, you and I talked about how good we feel once you're there. You have no
Right.
idea what you're being held back on. So,
It's so cool. I just want to say real quick, I'm sorry. This is so
yeah,
funny. Like we're editing our documentary together. We're still working on it, but I interviewed a pastor in Austin, Pastor Jimmy, and he had this one example and he was talking about, he said, it's like a three-legged stool. If you have one leg of the three-legged stool shorter than the other legs, it's dysfunctional. It just
yeah,
doesn't work. You sit on the stool and it falls over.
that's a
It's
good
kind of funny
example.
because he was mentioning three, just like you just did. That's like a good example.
It's true. It's the most stable structure, and three is this magical number in a sense that, not to get like too esoteric with it, but I find a lot of magic in threes and a lot of like holistic, wholesome completion in threes. But anyway, the idea is we want to make sure that we have some sort of tool or mechanism to help guide us through whatever comes our way. And so, for example, health, we want to make sure our body is in the best shape it can be, mentally, like physiologically, as well as our like physical bodies interacting. So, like carnivore, for example, is like one of the biggest things. And then I say strangles for jujitsu. So that basically it's working out, right? However, for somebody who is a combat veteran, and especially a man, I strongly believe that we need to simulate combat. We need to put ourselves in bad situations, and we can do it in a safe environment with something like jujitsu, where you're physically exhausted. You have to physically fight off somebody else who's trying to hurt you. But at the same time, it's a community of people who love you and protecting you. But we all kind of do this to make each other better with like iron sharpens iron. And I think it does a great job and I talked about with Dr. Sean O'Mara when I was at the convention, and he wanted to come on the podcast, but uh, and he was totally in agreement. And we talked a little bit about his past traumas and stuff. And he wants to he's thinking about getting involved in jujitsu now because you're forced in an environment where there's no like ifs, ands, or buts. You lose, you lose. You win, you win. There's no like, well, it was a bad day this, bad day that. You have to submit to the person who's better than you. And when you're being trapped and suffocated by somebody, or your arm being broken by somebody, you are forced to go to the other side to realize you're okay. So all that like over gravitated, swollen like hippocampus chemicals, I guess you could say, the chemicals in the hippocampus that's causing you to go to fight or flight. It's forcing that to transfer over to your prefrontal cortex to realize, hey, you are going to be okay. But the thing is, because of what combat did to them, they constantly add more things that are going to trigger, that make them think that combat is about to happen. And after being in a chronic state, in a prolonged state of like panic, where it's like gunshots happen and then your body just pumps like 20 minutes of adrenaline and chemicals to keep you alive, that keeps that funnel that allows that to happen keeps getting bigger and bigger because your body's justifying it. And you are not putting yourself back into those situations to realize you're going to be okay. So it constantly thinks it's going to be in a fight or flight for the rest of its life. And if you don't train your body out of that, you're going to be stuck in that spiral. And so I believe putting your body on the right track, putting your mind on the right track, with jujitsu, and then putting your soul on the right track with something like stoicism, which I love stoicism because it's non-dogmatic. You can be Muslim, you could be Christian, you could be whatever. Like the values of stoicism apply to practical life rather than like there's no requirement in any sort of belief, so it doesn't contradict with anything. There have been plenty. Even St. Augustine, I believe, was a devout Christian, obviously, but he was big into stoicism. And so, like, a lot of these prayers is like, give me the strength to handle like problems, and give me the wisdom to know what is a problem, what's not a problem, right? I misquote that thing all the time. My dad used to say it growing up. But give me the wisdom to know what's in my power and not in my power. That's like a Stoic principle used by Christians, borrowed by the Christian faith and implemented. So, Anywhom, so stake strangles and stoicism, I think, are three great mechanisms in order to propel young men and men who feel like they've been broken by either society or by the military to get them back on top, to give them autonomy over their own health, not to be dependent on drugs, not to have a feeling like they're broken. And like you said, you're healing humanity. And that, man, you're so much further above and beyond. And I was like late to the party, but I feel like I can get your message to these veterans and prevent as many suicides as I possibly can. That is my goal. These shirts, they're going to be in the link in the description, but that's going to help get the message out. But mostly, if you or somebody that you know is suffering mentally, especially if you're a man or a veteran, I'm giving out free consultations. And I just want, I'm not selling a magical elixir. I'm not selling some weird supplement. I'm not trying to get rich. I just want to interact with as many veterans as possible while at the same time making this my full time passion. And I've helped a lot of vets where I live. There's a ton of bases, a ton of forts, a ton of military influence. We're like surrounded. And I've helped a lot of people with this already. And I want to take it now a little bit further, which is why I'm starting this channel, which is why I'm revamping my online influence from just jujitsu based to this message. So, in the link in the description, you can schedule a free half-hour consultation with you. And if it's coaching with me, that's great. And if it's not, if it's just getting you on the right path and me showing you the right people to be listening to, that would be super happy with me. Let's just get you on the right path in general and make you realize you're not broken. There is a path to healing. The current intervention methods are completely garbage. Kerry and I and these other people, I believe we have the most effective intervention method for people who are in that state. And it's been shown over and over and over again. So that's kind of like my whole spiel. And I wanted to see, I guess, your takeaway and your conclusion from that.
That's awesome. I'm so happy you're doing it. I love it. I feel like we got another soldier on the field, like fighting a good fight. Seriously, we need more people to be talking about this. But my passion, I share the same passion as you. There's too many people out there in the world that are hopeless and they don't need to be. And question my motivations, question Chad's motivations, question Dr. Chafee or Dr. Barry. It's like this, what we're telling you, we're not saying, oh, give me $1,000 and then you can be cured. This is just free information. It's like, so we can help guide you in the way. But if you judge us and question our motivations, I think that'll help, because that when I started doing this, I'm like, what is this guy selling? Like, what is it? Like, I never could figure it out. So when you see healing like this, and you're a good person, you want other people to see this same healing that are suffering and don't need to be suffering, especially if they're good people like veterans that have made the ultimate sacrifice for us. So I'm totally on board. And like I said, Chad, I'd love to have you on the channel and shout out what you're doing and dig into your personal story a little bit more, but also maybe spread the word a little bit more so we could reach more veterans. So you have an open invite anytime.
I
And
would
if anyone wants to learn more about the documentary we're talking about, the website is healinghumanity.movie. Healinghumanity.movie. We're following real people over the course of a year. Um, we've already filmed 30 people, but this is going to go on forever. We're doing the documentary and then we're going to do an ongoing series, and the stories just keep coming in more and more. So we're just going to keep doing more and more stories. So if you have a story and it's incredible and you want to share, you can also submit that at healinghumanity.movie. And if you want to support us, it's completely crowdfunded. We sell shirts and hats and stuff like that. And every penny from every one of those goes 100% towards the documentary. I'm not taking a paycheck. I've been volunteering my time for over a year now, working on the documentary and putting my own money into it. I want it to be different. I feel like the reason I was so sick, like I mentioned earlier, is because of greed, because of nothing but greed. And so I wanted to do this as a passion project. So this documentary is we're turning it into a nonprofit. We're actually working with an accountant right now to turn it into a nonprofit, but I'm not taking a salary or a paycheck. Any donations or t-shirt sales, all of that goes 100% towards the documentary to help heal more people.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much. I would love to come on the show, talk about stoicism, especially if that's something you're into. And I would love to talk about my story. I suffered, for 10 years. I had a weird thing happen to me and it sent me down this spiral that I could not believe controlled me. And I was crippling, anxiety, so on and so forth, to the point where like my wife was having to drive me because I couldn't drive anymore. It was pathetic. I felt like less of a man. I didn't want to ask for help. And when I did ask for help, they're like, here's some drugs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was just embarrassed and ashamed. And
You wanted to have hope, and no one gave you hope. And you and
Exactly.
I have the hope that we can give other people. So I think that's
Exactly. And that's, yeah. And it overwhelms you with a desire and a purpose to get this message out. And so I was like, I'm a nobody. You know what I mean? Like I'm a nobody. Why would anybody listen? But it wasn't about that anymore, about having a successful channel. My thing is I want as many voices going against the mainstream as possible. You know what I mean? Why do vegans get out there and to spout whatever they say over and over and over? I think they're like there needs to be as much resistance in the reverse. So then this is why this channel is here now. And like I said, I revamped my entire social media and I feel a weird sense of purpose. When I wake up in the morning, this is what I'm thinking about. How am I going to do better at this? And that drive is very consuming, I would say. And so I feel like my health and my spirit are aligned with this message, which I've never really felt before. Like in jujitsu, I'm very passionate about jujitsu, but it's very one dimensional. You know what I mean? I've helped so many people just with jujitsu, but there's something missing. And I feel like this was like a big pillar. And once I had all three of those, I like shot through the atmosphere and I felt like there was no more pull on me. So, anywho, yeah, you and I do this, I believe, because we need as many people to hear this as soon as possible so the suffering, the unnecessary profit-driven suffering can be put to a halt in some sense in as many people as possible, right? So that's where I'm at.
Yep, 100%. I agree.
All right, just let me know. Just contact me anytime. I will drop whatever I'm doing to come onto your channel.
I'll
Um,
shoot you an invite right after this. I'll shoot you an invite. Maybe next week we can jump on and do it.
yes, let's do it. Yes, I'll drop everything to do that. Thank you so much, Kerry, for coming on the show. You're the best.
Thank you, Chad. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I'm going to put that link in the description, guys. So if you want, but I cannot tell you how impactful this documentary is, and I don't think we did it justice during the podcast. But go check on that link. There's like the little teasers in there, and it gets you really involved. I would say, I guess, like emotionally connected to this journey and it gets you thinking. So, thank you so much. And I will see you next week, hopefully, or maybe a little bit later, depending on how it goes. And God bless you and your family. And thank you for doing what you do.
Awesome. Thank you. God bless you too.
Have a good one, Carrie.